You know, I hinted that I'm going to do this for a while, trying to look for, the right mood, spirit, words, whatever, because preparation is anathema, directly anathema to exactly what I'm going to say. And it's funny because the only times that it's said correctly seems to be by people who have prepared. But in particular, what I want to rant against in this case is professionalism, preparation, putting too much effort into the packaging, whatever. Obviously, if you watch my videos, you know that I don't bother with this. Is that just laziness? Maybe this all my philosophy, maybe everything that I think is some sort of defense against what is the established, correct way of the world, as it were. But in this particular case, it's most telling because in a sense, to go against this is to go against everything that I've ever stood for, everything that I've ever been, enamored with. So, what we have is this is a world which has slowly, over the past few centuries, become one in which amateurs, dilettantes, those who wish to affect it, who have strong passions, etc., however, not so strong as to devote themselves to the packaging, right? Will almost certainly fail. You look at politicians, for example. It doesn't matter how passionate you are, etc. Nowadays, at least above a certain level, that of the very local politician, the only way to become, to rise in the ranks of politics is to work the machine. Now, working the machine is fine, but more than that, and there's a certain natural talent to that. But in terms of, once you rise above that machine level, there's this, you need to have this practiced, prepared way about you. You can't walk into a debate just knowing what you know. You have to have practiced your debate again and again and again against a fake opponent. You have to practice to get your soundbite in, to get your key words. You'll listen to the talking points that our politicians now bring to the stage. And they're these canned little things. They don't like to deviate from them. They've been taught again and again, you cannot deviate. Because if you start to show your own intelligence, if you start to show a free will, if you start to show anything beyond that packaged product that's trying to be sold, what you end up with is some sort of gap, some sort of faux pas. There may be some who can get around this. In some sense, maybe Joe Biden is sort of the person who can get around the talking points. There are a few people with that natural knack for it. But for the most part, I would say, you look at people, you listen to them, and they've got this prepared point that they're meant to hit, and this prepared way of saying that they're meant to hit it. And in a sense, this is all the ill effect of professionalism. Why? Because professionalism is all about deciding what you want to say and saying it clearly enough that any fucking idiot out there can understand what you're saying, in essence, but without giving all of the torturous thought that brings you to the decision making that you have to be in. It also constrains the freedoms. If you're narrowly focusing on one sort of thought, one sort of specialization, whatever, you end up ripping apart that gestalt. Now, my belief is that that gestalt is important. The ironic thing is, and I may have mentioned this, you can touch this through so many different ways: music, art, speeches, discussion, philosophy, whatever you want to touch it on. But without hitting that sort of packaged medium, it doesn't reach. So an excellent example that I was kind of tossing around in my head, and music drives me that way, and art drives. The whole purpose of art, I think, is to spark these thoughts, this kind of connectivity in people. But the amusing and ironic part of it is that the only people who can manage to do that, the only people who can reach, are people who've practiced and tailored their craft to be on stage and know how to inform that sort of very well controlled position there. And what's so strange is that no, there's more. That's what you're trying to say, and if there's more, well, you can't really say it in that prepared, controlled position. What I was going to take as my example, although I have not seen it very much, maybe not all the way through, is The Big Lebowski, which comes across as sort of this, Lebowski himself comes across as sort of this great philosopher, clothed in this unprofessional, just comes out with it as he were, right? He's the dude, man. Yeah. Except to present that image required tremendous professionalism and control. And that's where I see the problem. It's as though I'm tilting at windmills, because there is no way to go against it without that preparation. In a sense, this rant is almost prepared. Not that I've memorized the speeches or whatever. In no way have I done that. This is just coming straight from the heart, but coming straight from the heart in a way that is still more focused than I like, and then I truly accept or want, right? I want to be exploratory. I want it all to be exploratory. I want life to be that way. I want it not to be a bad thing that I stumble around in a gray haze, imagining things and suffering in my despair. I want that not to be a limitation, but to eventually be able to come back from this again, as I've done before. And I don't know how that's to be done. But anyhow, why is it such a terrible thing? I mean, why is it that one must train and prepare and learn to be and exude something? Not quite sure, but I feel that it absolutely is such a terrible thing, that we've lost something as humanity as we've driven down this path, that, you know, we will never have another Da Vinci, right? For whatever value or loss that is, it will not be. We will never have another Jefferson. What we'll have is these cubbyholed little people who are experts at their particular little slot in life, and nothing more than that. And that hurts somehow. Why? I don't know. I don't know why it hurts. It hurts because it seems too much like little ants or bees, all performing their explicit and defined functionality that they've trained or inbred their whole life to be. That there is no longer any freedom. That children at the age of 6 start playing soccer and going to special preschool or special kindergartens, to first grade in this case, specialized schools, so that their path can be defined for them, so that everything will work out better, smoother, easier, so that they will have that good life, but will never have the freedom that maybe once was there. And that's very disturbing. It's very disturbing that everything's targeted, commercialized, pinpointed to a certain task and nothing more, aimed to get, to convince, to change one little thing, one little piece, when nobody has an idea of what the overall really is. And nobody ever will, probably. It doesn't matter which path we face, perhaps, but there is no chance without that Gestalt view. And I guess that's kind of the whole thing, is that it's almost a magical kind of thinking to say it all connects together, and unless you can step back far enough to see that full connection, you're just focused on one thing. For example, CEOs who are focused on getting their stock value up are no longer focused on building a good company or producing a good product necessarily. Those things may be ancillary events that can to some extent take place, but no longer does one look in that very, very broad view and just put all the pieces together loosely, without proof, without absolute certainty of their little piece, but draw it all together and try to push a generic view forward, however that may be. And when they do, when you see those CEOs go forward, when they're trying to rally their forces to, their employees to head towards a better tomorrow, or whatever they're trying to do, whatever broad platitudes they've decided sound nice and hit their pinpoint targets well, it's still a very prepared, very focused aspect to try to get there. And if they are not necessarily willing to put the effort, to put the focus in, they hire people to put that focus in for them, and then they prep for that, and they give that presentation that's been thoroughly vetted and screened and prepared. And it seems that everything, the headlong rush that has largely fueled whatever improvements or technological advances we've had, is almost the wrong path. And I can't quite put my finger on it completely. Because you see, to do so would be to surrender and to actually focus heavily on that one question. But it does seem that we've moved in the wrong direction. And that's all.